I'm talking to Patrick Bond, who is the professor at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and the director of the Centre for Civil Society. And he wrote a very interesting piece today on groundup.org, which we will publish on Fin24, which really spells out the situation at ETV. Patrick joins us now from Pretoria. Are you in Pretoria right now?
I am at the university here. We have a conference. It's great to be able to join you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. What do you make of the situation? Obviously, there are the allegations that Copland makes that this is very much to do with gross misconduct, but there is a lot of opinion that the political interference, and also from allegations from Golding that the political interference is the real reason behind this. What is your take on it from your side?
Well, I do think that there's a pretense for firing Marcel Golding. I think he makes a very convincing case that the purchase of 24 million rand worth of shares of Ellie's was winked and nodded at the way similar purchases were made by the chief executive and leadership who could justify it later because they're very good entrepreneurs. And as a result, it looks like this has just come up really this month, even though it occurred starting in July, August. And the big crisis at that level was when Ellie's, the company Golding was buying into, had its share price, it's actually crashed by about 80%. He's lost about half that 24 million rand. You know, what he said was that he would use his own personal money to buy back and then give the proceeds, the shares, to the family trust. So there's a lot of bickering and, the kind of intercorporate debate about was that a good investment. But it does look suspicious. Golding is making a persuasive case that the genuine problem is one in which ETV was an unreliable vehicle for some key political players, namely the South African Clothing and Textile Workers Union, SACTU, sometimes called, let me be frank, a sweetheart union to the government. And so much so that its prior general secretary, who worked a lot in government circles, and especially NEDLAC, the National Economic Development and Labour Council, Ibrahim Patel, was then given the Ministry of Economic Development, a very vague ministry. But over time, over the past 6 years, Patel's actually got a huge portfolio. It's called a Presidential Infrastructure Investment Commission. And that commission, Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Commission, so the PIC, and that with its special investment projects, the SIPs, the PIC SIPs, that's where a huge amount of our money as taxpayers is going. 800 billion rand is going to be paid to various infrastructure suppliers. And these are infrastructure white elephants, unfortunately, or they're so biased, like the Medupi power plant, that I fear they're going to be the continuing cause of extreme social unrest, degradation of our environment. The inequality is extreme because ordinary people have been paying 150% higher prices for their electricity, while the biggest single user, sometimes up to 10% of the country's grid, BHP Billiton, has not had an increase, and they pay only a tenth of the price that ordinary people pay. And it's that kind of infrastructure for big corporates, extractive industries, mining, big electricity projects, the big coal projects that Transnet has in mind to ship coal from Lephalale and from Mpumalanga down to Richards Bay, or the South Durban, that big port. That's what's really under contestation here. It's the huckstering of mega infrastructure projects by Ibrahim Patel.
So, I mean, it sounds like no one's really buying this whole disciplinary hearing into gross misconduct. It feels like people want answers. Do you think there needs to be some kind of open investigation, or do you think it'll play out in a court of law?
Well, there may be further court hearings. Marcel Golding lost in his bid in the Labour Court on Friday to prevent the disciplinary hearing that was scheduled for yesterday, for Monday. For Monday. And as a result, he resigned on Sunday. And ETV staff learned about that Monday. And then today, his wife, the chief operating officer, resigned. So there's been a clearing of the decks, and his only major supporter on the board of the holding company, HCI, was Barbara Hogan, and she also has resigned at the same time, basically taking Marcel Golding's point of view. But you see, what Marcel Golding made a big mistake, I think, in doing was putting these secret emails into his court filings on Friday, because those emails certainly implicate Yunus Sheikh, one of the notorious Sheikh brothers, with Ibrahim Patel, and of course the whole backing group of Andre Creel, Satu, Johnny Copeland. So that little gang clearly is running e-news in a way designed to make Ibrahim Patel look better, such as asking e-news to highlight as a lead story the opening of a dam in March, just before the election, which was a dubious dam. It's called a De Hoop Dam, and 60% of its water is going to big platinum companies, threatening the Kruger Park. The officials of Kruger Park actually filed an environmental impact assessment along with NGOs, asking that the dam not be built for platinum because it's going to wreck a huge part of Kruger Park. It's going to make it dry and throw into question one of our greatest national resources and a major site for contestation of the sort of benefits of ecotourism. And instead now most of the benefits of this De Hoop Dam will go to platinum companies. And that's what I'm pretty sure Ibrahim Patel did not want ETV to start investigating. And that's why Ibrahim Patel made a deal to have happy face news, the kind of stuff that you expect from SABC, that is just pro-big infrastructure. And that's the construction of a kind of hegemony, a full common sense support for infrastructure that Patel was doing through ETV. And the big mistake Marcel Golding made, I believe, is to put the incriminating emails that incriminated Marcel and his wife in doing a deal. And part of the deal was to get special state access to the regulation of the set-top boxes, which will be the interface between the ordinary South African who has a TV and cable, but also the internet. And that, in turn, is something that the Right to Know movement, a very important social movement in our country, has been saying, no, that must be part of our right to information, must be provided free. So there's a huge set of conflicts that go deep into our society, right to the core of our information. Where is it coming from? The propagandizing. In fact, the Sunday Business Times, I think a little bit exaggeratedly, called Ibrahim Patel like a Stasi, East German control freak, right? And his continuing badgering of Yunus Sheikh to in turn badger Bronwyn Keane-Young and Marcel Golding. Look, they all come off pretty bad in all of this, I would say. And it's very important to get beyond the personality conflict and look at these big structural issues. They're so similar to a prior set of emails that were leaked when Cyril Ramaphosa told lawmen officials that he would bring in the cops on August 15, 2012, the next day, the Maracana massacre. Those are the kind of relationships that these ex-leftists, when they become big-time entrepreneurs, they're out of the mining union, they're out of the clothing textile union, it doesn't really matter, they come from liberation movement backgrounds like the Sheikh brothers. They get into these opportunities to distort and destroy so much in this country. We have to keep a really close eye and look for the deeper structural interests.
So this whole this process is really kind of showing ETV for its more shady side with its links to government and to trade unions, and the kind of a message of how careful you have to be when you move from trade union and politics into the private sector. But how do you think Golding has played his cards in this process? He could have stayed to fight for the disciplinary. We know that the hearing would have gone from Monday until Thursday. Thursday tomorrow is when the AGM, the HCI AGM is, where he is the chairperson, and you know, by being in the disciplinary hearing, he would have probably been voted out as chairperson. So has he played his cards correctly? What do you think is going to happen going forward?
Well, it sounded like some people call it a Hail Mary pass, the last gasp effort he made on Friday in the Labour Court to put all that evidence, 57 pages of these secret emails from Yunus Sheikh and Johnny Copeland, very revealing. It really tells us a great deal about the modus operandi of politicians and big corporate guys. It's a very revealing and teaching, kind of moment for all of us. What I think he overestimated is appeal to the judges by saying, I'm being subjected to a political putsch, and I shouldn't be, as a result, subject to disciplinary hearing. And he might be making a good case. He might have resisted this political pressure. It looks very much to me, because Ibrahim Patel very much enjoyed the infrastructure coverage that Marcel Golding's wife, Bronwyn Keen Young, described in those emails as outstanding coverage. In fact, utterly uncritical, happy-faced journalism about these mega infrastructure projects. And I suspect that Golding really had understood that everything was going against him. He better pull out all the stops in nuclear weapons, including all these secret emails. And like Cyril Ramaphosa, with the emails about Lonmin and the coming massacre, we will never forget the kind of power relations that are unveiled. And with the NSA controlling all our emails, even looking at this interview, we really have to be quite careful about how we communicate. I think that's one of the long-standing lessons that probably Marcel Golding has learned to his regret now.
Judge Anton Steenkamp at the Labour Court did bring to the attention his concerns about the political interference, although he said that he couldn't rule on that matter, and that this case had no place in the Labour Court, and that's why he took it off. But he certainly shared his sentiment in his verdict. It seems now that it's going to be probably go into a court where Golding will sue HCI and Sabido for unlawful dismissal. Are we going to see more dirt, and is this going to be quite damaging for ETV and ENCA going forward?
Well, there could well be more dirt, and E-News is going to have to be quite careful about the way it covers it. Under Marcel Golding's control, they put all this information up for us to download about these particular scandals, but there may well be much more, and it may be that in playing a little soft and loose with the rules over time, such as the 24 million rand purchase of Ellie's shares, Golding has some of his own dirty laundry that will be aired. They may settle out of court. I mean, Golding has a huge stake, well over R1 billion in this company. They're going to have to find some way to lower that leverage, get him out of there. SACTU had an opportunity to work with Golding to say, okay, strip out E-News away from Hoskin and get the non-media assets, particularly things like the very profitable gambling operation, out. But they turned it down, and I think at this stage it looks like these are bridges burned. Sometimes in politics there's no permanent friends or enemies, but in these very intense moments where people lose their trust and hate each other's guts, as appears to be the case, that's something we should be aware of. Look, the bigger story remains that our major media sources are broadcast media, SABC and ETV especially, and now the newspapers, with the Sakanjalo Group taking over the Independent, with the Gupta family very involved in both the broadcast news and print media. We do have a huge problem in this country of systematic structural bias towards the government in ways that will allow for these sorts of little minor scandals to be covered. But it's those bigger structural processes in which the society is being brainwashed by the news to think, oh, big infrastructure projects, good for jobs, good for the economy. That's the agenda that's very evident in this full scandal.
It does seem to be a very much an issue that everyone is worried about, the freedom of the press, especially when the whole story about the nuke deal with Russia and that going forward, there needs to be a positive light spun on that from government. So and also with the protection of information bill coming in, I think everyone's a bit cautious and a bit scared at the moment about media freedom, and this kind of story and how it's been breaking and the allegations certainly don't do anything.
Very good. That's a very good set of issues that the society has to mobilize against. I would say the Right to Know movement, righttoknow.org.za, is probably the most important of these social movements. There's a SOS, Save Our Public Broadcasting campaign, and they have had a fairly periodic high visibility protests to raise civil society's interests. I do hope that instead of sweetheart unionism, the kind of relations that COSATU unions, some of them have had with the ANC government, we're going to see a little bit more of the spirit of NUMSA, the metal workers, just announcing this week they're breaking away, and they're becoming much more of a watchdog, because I think they quite accurately understand that at stake here are major corporates, international corporates, with local compradors, local allies like your Cyril Ramaphosa's to Lawmen, and the environment and society and equality, all of the values that we all thought we were winning on with the end of apartheid are going to be set back unless society remobilizes. That's a fairly obvious conclusion, and luckily a group like Right to Know, I think, stands ready to start ramping up protests against these kinds of attacks on media freedom.
Patrick, thank you very much for your insights there, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thank you very much.